Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today we wish to complete our two-week series on the topic, the world of work. Today we will discuss the subtopic, work and the power within us. I want to take this opportunity to thank the North Idaho College Convocation Series Committee for giving us this opportunity to have their guests the past 2 weeks. It has been very stimulating and informative to us, and we hope it has been to you. To discuss today's subtopic, I'm very happy to welcome to our program Dr. Mark Newton. Our guest today holds a baccalaureate degree from the Western Kentucky University. He was a graduate cum laude in the fields of psychology and English. He also holds a Master of Arts degree in education, and that too is from Western Kentucky University. In 1979, he received his Doctor of Philosophy in Education and Sociology from the Ohio State University. Our guest presently serves as the Associate Director for Personnel Development and Field Services for the National Center for Research in Vocational Education at the Ohio State University. Dr. Newton, welcome to our state, our city, and to our program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm very happy to have three panel members today and to join with me in questioning our guests. To my immediate left is State Senator Mary Lou Reed. Next to her is our Director of Informational Services, Steve Schink, and Idaho Attorney Janelle Burke, and I shall ask Senator Reed to commence the questioning.
Thank you, Tony. Dr. Newton, what kind of research goes on at the National Center for Research in Vocational Education? What do you folks do back there in Columbus, Ohio?
You did tell me this is a 2-hour show, is that right?
Briefly, Dr. Newton.
The National Center, first of all, I should say that when we use the term vocational education, we're talking about the full range of services that are provided for people in the whole career development process. So for us, we use vocational education as a generic phrase representing the preparation of people for work and their upgrading and retraining from junior high school level through adulthood. Generally speaking, we focus our research on how to improve the delivery of systems and programs that are designed to equip people with the skills they need for employability in this country. We work primarily with state departments of education, local education units, the federal government, and the private sector, a number of business companies, corporations, and whatnot, in improving their skill development programs and capitalizing on the findings of research to enable them to improve their programs. Also, we are involved right now in a great deal of research relative to the basic skill improvement of our secondary school young people, and using vocational education or practical learning as a strategy for enhancing basic skill development of young people. We have a lot of research going on in the area of the displaced worker, a phenomenon that has hit this country hard in many sectors, and what kinds of mechanisms and strategies are needed to move those people into productive employment in another sector. Very concerned about equity across the board, equity of opportunity and employment training for people with handicaps, better movement and career mobility for females in typically male-dominated occupations, and in like fashion, more opportunities for males in typically female-dominated occupations. We have a growing concern in this country with relationship to the minority becoming the majority population in many of our cities. And we're not really well equipped in terms of the teaching styles and the learning styles, integration that needs to occur to allow those young people to develop their potential as it needs to be developed for the economic security of this country. Generally, those are the broad parameters.
Very broad, obviously.
We do a lot of research and data collection, more data collection than research for the United States Congress in terms of the data requirements that it has to make policy decisions as it relates to the skilled training requirements of this country and the development of its workforce.
But then you really do apply your research.
Yes.
So you are basically educating vocational educators along the way. Is that correct?
Indirectly, we are. We prepare and provide materials and resources for those who are in policy-making positions and can influence change. Typically, their responsibility is to directly apply what we learn and what we produce at the local setting.
Is that what you mean by leadership development? There are a lot of words here that are perhaps words of art related to vocational education, but leadership development is what you're referring to?
That's correct. That's correct. We have a specific mission to focus on those people who have, one of our missions, those people who have leadership positions in technical and vocational education broadly defined across the country, to equip them to give the leadership that's required to meet the particular needs in their state or territory.
Thank you.
Steve Sheen.
I would think that in your role, many roles that you just outlined for us, one of the things you would have to be interested in is the match between what's happening today in vocational education and what's happening in the marketplace. Are there any trends of real significance that you've uncovered in your research that you could share with us?
I think predominantly we need to recognize that we, in many instances, have lost our dominance in the world economy as it relates to the manufacturing sector, and that we're undergoing a transition in this country to prepare our workforce and to prepare the private sector as well for the emergence of the information-based economy, the information-based society, and capitalize on our strengths in that regard. I'm not saying that we are losing or will lose our manufacturing capacity. I'm saying that the competition is so fierce and the cost of labor, the differential in the cost of labor between this country and the developing world is so great that we need to put more chips on the technology, learning how to do things better, faster, more efficiently, and that perhaps the manufacturing component of the manufacturing industry won't occur in this country, but the technology behind it and the application of that technology in many other quarters may. Small business development, entrepreneurship, the development of new markets and enterprises, I think, is the wave of the future. More people are employed and will be employed in firms of less than 100 employees than ever before. And it's the American ingenuity, it's the American tenacity that's going to come to bear, I think, in developing new markets, and I think the vehicle is going to be small business development.
Your answer strikes very close to home for, I think, people in this region. We have been seeing over the past few years a loss in what were relatively high-paying industrial jobs and a replacement of those jobs with relatively low-paying service employment opportunities. Does the small business entrepreneurship growth that you're talking about, does that follow that trend, or is there an opportunity there for people who are displaced from once high-paying jobs to match that level of income in the small business sector?
Our best guess is that small business development will moderate, will bring balance, and will provide richness to the economy. It will add, it will spark the economy, and it will add opportunities for people that perhaps were formerly displaced to reach their previous levels of income and surpass them, while employing other people as well.
That's a ray of hope. I'm glad.
It is a ray of hope, and it's real.
Janelle Berg.
I'd like to follow up on that line of questioning because so many of the people who have been involved in, for example, lumber or mining industries in North Idaho suddenly find themselves as displaced workers. What is your recommendation for the displaced worker when one finds themselves in that position? How does one go about starting again with their life?
Well, one of the first requirements, I think, is to capitalize on institutions such as North Idaho College, and capitalize on the opportunities that it and related institutions may provide for upgrading and retraining of skills. Yes, the transition typically means a much lower salary as one transfers to another position, another job. There's a great need for counseling and psychological services. What you've described to me in this community is not idiosyncratic to this community. It's true in Michigan, it's true in other parts of the country that have been hit very hard. One thing that we've learned is that we're an optimistic people. We don't necessarily believe what's really happening around us. And in many instances, in too many instances, the displaced worker isn't willing to accept what's really happening. And there's a great need for counseling and guidance service in that regard. It's not just a personal, individual concern. Oftentimes it's an entire family that's affected. These are real people with real problems and real needs. And counseling services are very important to begin the process. Once that the displaced worker has come to grips with the reality of his or her situation, it is required that the proper support mechanisms come into bear on the whole situation, and programs that are offered for those people in terms of assessing their skills, the transferability of those skills to new and different kinds of occupations, and the integration of those skills into different kinds of jobs is a process that is well taken by institutions such as this college.
Is it better to attempt to move to a new location and find similar kinds of employment, or is it better to try to be retrained perhaps for some other kind of employment?
Our experience and the research that we're familiar with suggests that it's really, I can't answer that question, but our research and our experience suggests that people by and large who have been displaced are unwilling to move. They'd rather stay home and hope that the old job's going to return and hope that something new will emerge rather than move. We are not really a mobile population when it comes to the subset of our population who's been displaced by the market. Generally speaking, I think people have a better chance geographically moving into an occupation that was similar or equal to the occupation they had, but in another part of the country. Our experience has been, however, that people are generally unwilling to do that.
And how realistic is it to believe that you may be able to do as well in another part of the country, or even that you would be able to open a new business in the same part of the country? How realistic is it to believe that you can find those kinds of jobs?
We do have computer banks that are operational right now that are designed to match the skills of a displaced worker, the education and training of a displaced worker, and the most recent experience of the displaced worker with openings in other parts of the country. So those resources in many sectors, primarily in the manufacturing sector, are available. They're available and are employed in many circumstances. But the psychological stress and unrest that's a function of physically moving yourself and a family oftentimes outweighs that potential. Not everyone is suited for small business development, but it's an untapped resource that has the capacity, I think, for bringing balance to the market. Many of us don't realize that that we have skills when they're properly nurtured that could lead to small business development.
But if an area is suffering a depletion of its prior resources, economic resources, then isn't it difficult to start a small business and be successful in that small business?
It's as difficult as you want to make it. A lot of it has to do with your mental attitude. A lot of it has to do with your drive. A lot of it has to do with the belief in yourself, self-esteem, knowing where the resources are that one might tap, and tapping into things like North Idaho College ought to be able to lead you to where some of those resources are, such as venture capital, risk loans, and those kinds of things. There are opportunities that are provided through career counseling services that talk about promising small business sectors in various locations. For example, this morning I spoke about the 10 best bets for small business development that Marvin Citron and others have talked about. One is the bed and breakfast business. And I would tend to think in an area like this, with the incredible beauty of its natural resources, that you could well begin to attract people from around the world to enjoy the beauty as well. And one small opportunity may be the bed and breakfast inn. And I think it's something worth studying.
Dr. Newton, I'm particularly thinking about the displaced worker who's between the ages of 55 and 60 and has worked in heavy industry, and the salary has been good. Maybe they're a little short with the number of years they need for their pension, and they're reaching very close to retirement, and to ask them to start completely over, and they have 5 years left or 4, and you even have training in that, it would seem to me that that's a very different category than someone who's maybe even fortunate enough to be displaced at an earlier age if you're going to be displaced. What does your center do concerning that particular worker? I know a lot of those exist in places like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How do you deal with that very sad story?
Well, we don't, to answer your first question. We don't provide direct services. We take a look at what's happening and what some of the interventions might be to correct the situation. One small answer to that problem is in the area of temporary services and leasing of help. If one isn't able to find full-time employment in a sector, oftentimes agencies can place people temporarily in jobs that are directly or indirectly related to the kinds of jobs that they had, even in the manufacturing industry. So the leasing of employees is becoming more of a reality in this country than it ever has before. And the kinds of people that you're talking about are oftentimes the kinds of people who can serve as resources for those kinds of firms. It's very difficult, especially within that age bracket, and there's not always an easy answer. When we engage in these market shifts that we're engaging in, when we realize that we are dealing in fierce economic competition in a global economy, at the same time we're trying to develop ways to better cooperate and collaborate in economic ventures with our own competition, the outcomes are sometimes brutal, but that's part of what we're going to have to experience, as harsh as that sounds, as we move into a new way of doing business and into new markets.
I guess I would get on the brink of controversy. Our policy has become pretty much one of free trade, and we have certainly opened our markets up. Some of our trading partners have not been so generous, and therefore we really don't have a free market in some areas. Is there anything that, and we're moving to address that, particularly the Congress, don't we have to address that on behalf of our workers, that if it's going to be free, it's got to be free both ways?
Bringing back the Yankee trader tradition is something we must do. And we've got to learn to be less apathetic in terms of our voting practices, and we've got to learn to be less apathetic in terms of holding our elected officials accountable for the things that impact on our lives.
Thank you. Mary Lou Reed.
Dr. Newton, you talked to the students and the faculty at North Idaho College about work and the power within us. Would you expand a little bit upon what you mean by the power within us, and what was share the advice, please, that you were giving the students?
In some of the traveling that I've been doing over the past number of years, I've been struck with what appears to me to be, in many instances, all too many instances, a lack of confidence that many of us have in ourselves. And it's confidence and drive that made this country great, at least in my point of view. And I think there's a role that the schools can play, and it was addressed also this morning, in enhancing the development of a strong sense of self-worth and self-confidence in our young people. The Harvard psychologist James estimated that the average person uses 10% of the mental power available to them. That leaves 90% of a great resource that's untapped, that goes to waste. And my pitch is that we learn how to tap into and bring up to bear on the problems that confront ourselves and our lives, that 90% that goes untapped. And the way to do that, I think, is to recognize and to deal with the resource that is available to you and to me, to tap into that power through knowing where we want to go, realizing that we can get there, bringing to bear on that journey all the resources that we possibly can, and believing in ourselves throughout the entire journey. It's faith in oneself. It's believing in our ability. It's developing a sense of consciously creating our own circumstances, and I think there's a role for the public schools to play in that, as well as institutions such as North Idaho College.
You talked about imaging. What do you mean by imaging?
All too often, I don't think we have a clear, crisp image of what we want in life. A particular job, a clear, crisp image of the lifestyle that we want, the body shape that we want. That's what I mean by imaging. Really seeing within our deepest elements exactly what it is that we want, so we can better go after it once we've imaged it, and not losing sight of that image. This is not unlike the holistic approach to medicine these days. Physicians are finding more and more value to the imaging process as it relates to the elimination of disease from the body, focusing in on the part of the body that's affected by a particular disease and imaging its execution. It's the holistic approach to medicine. It's also the holistic approach to charting one's destiny.
Do you think the American dream is still a valid dream, that you really can teach students that they can be whatever they want to be?
The American dream is alive and well. It just needs to be reinforced, in my opinion. I do believe that. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's exactly what I was asking, and you answered it. Thank
you. It just needs to be reinforced.
Steve Sheen.
Columbus, Ohio is a long way from Coeur d'Alene, but you've spent a little time here and have had a chance to observe this community. And I think that the picture for us, while it's not entirely bright, certainly isn't. The
picture is bright.
That's the reinforcement I needed to have. You're right. We've got some good things going for this community. We've got an excellent community college with a very strong vocational program. We've got a growing tourism industry. We've got very supportive and active local legislators. We've got a new local effort called Jobs Plus that hopes in a very short time to raise about $1 million that would be devoted to economic development efforts.
They will raise $1 million.
I think they will. They're very close to that goal already. You mentioned a bed and breakfast. What else do you see that this community could be doing to help itself?
Well, I'm not intimately in tune with Coeur d'Alene other than to be quite struck with the natural beauty that you have here and perhaps capitalizing on that. One of the projections for the future is the marine industry. People will have more and more leisure time available to them, either for structural reasons. The work week may be shorter than 40 hours, not by choice, but by structure. Or the baby boomers, people like myself, will have more, will retire early and have more time available to them for leisure time travel and whatnot. And I think you're sitting in a prime location to capitalize on that. The boating industry, I think, is one possibility. I know North Idaho College has a new program in
marine technology.
I think that's right on the cusp of an emerging trend. The boating industry is part and parcel of the leisure industry in many respects. So I think focusing perhaps in some ways on the marine industry in this particular community offers some real potential. The leasing of services for the resort industry, I think, offers some potential. Leasing of maids, a business leases maids. The leasing of maintenance personnel for an emerging resort economy, I think, offers potential. The leasing of secretaries, obviously, is big business in other parts of the country, and I think it has potential here as well. The leasing of computer operators is an opportunity, I think, that may be capitalized on as we move more and more towards an information-based economy, and I'm sure Coeur d'Alene is going to be part of that movement. So the whole notion of the leasing of services offers opportunities for small business development. I mentioned this morning specialized publications. We are becoming a society of people who generally don't read general publications. We're beginning to find that now in the publishing industry, that some of the more general publications don't have the readership that the very specific, well-focused publications do have. I mentioned this morning that the Modern Maturity is the magazine that is now able to charge the greatest amount of money for a full-page color ad. That was a surprise to many people, $120,000 according to what I was reading for a one-page ad. Well, most people thought Time or Newsweek or TV Guide or one of the others were in that ballpark. No, it's the focused publication. So a lot depends on the ingenuity of the human talent that exists in Coeur d'Alene to figure out what are those very special markets out there that a newsletter or a special interest publication is ripe for. I was reading the Wall Street Journal yesterday about a woman who there's some excitement about the publication she's developing for women over 40, as an example. On the front page of the Wall Street, there was an article about the gentleman who started PC World. He's now a multimillionaire. He focused on just that market of people who were buying computers and putting them into their homes and wanted to keep up with the new technologies and the new software that was available for computer application. Another one is, it's low cost, is the specialty greeting card business. It's a booming business. People all over the country are more inclined towards very special kinds of greeting cards that are not mass-produced, that carry a certain individuality about them, and I'm confident that Coeur d'Alene has some art talent that could be explored and brought to bear on that kind of small business. Those are some examples that you know the market here better than I, that may or may not have application, but they're worth thinking about. Faster fast foods. We're beginning to see a real move in some quarters away from, I don't want to use any names here, away from the fast food restaurants where there's a dining room as part of the establishment, and more towards the drive-through that focuses on a single fast food item or two fast food items as opposed to a full menu where you drive through and get what you need and go on, pizza for example. There seems to be some real potential there rather than the capital investment that's required to open up a larger full menu but fast food restaurant. And in a resort community, I would tend to think there may be some options there.
Janelle, less than 1 minute.
Well, the subject I was going to ask you about is going to take more than 1 minute. I was going to ask you about equity in the workplace, and is it threatening? Is equity in the workplace threatening to those people who are already in the workplace? Or is equity an idea whose time has come?
Equity is an idea whose time is overdue. Equity, in many instances, is threatening to people, but equity, for no other reason than the demographics that are part of this country, will force itself upon the workforce. The aging baby boomer workforce like myself is heading towards retirement at the turn of the century. We're white and we're male. The new entrants into the workforce are female and minority, by and large across the board. So the security, the retirement security of the white middle class, in many instances, is going to rest on...
I'm sorry to have to interrupt. We're out of time and we must go, but thank you very much. It's been a pleasure having you here. You've been most informative. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our 2-week series on the workplace, and we hope you'll be with us again next week at the same time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.